105 years ago in Sydney, a crazed gunman's violent siege with police came to a quick and lethal end when a visiting American cowboy commandeered a revolver from the police and showed them just how to deal with such situations. An amazing act of heroism that he called frontier justice. It's Surry Hills, Sydney, on Sunday, June the 1st, 1919, and a 40-year-old Chinese man named Li Hin has decided to seek revenge on the world. He was furious because he'd been recently romantically rebuffed by women in the church group he attended. So he armed himself with smoke bombs and 2 revolvers and headed out to the church building to confront them. Around 7 p.m, Li Hin burst into the first-floor Church of Christ and Chinese Mission School on Wentworth Avenue. He set off the smoke bombs, causing panic and confusion, and then began firing wildly. Within a minute, Li Hin had shot and wounded nearly a dozen people, with one of his victims later dying of his wounds. Li Hin fled the scene, chased by an angry crowd. He ran through the narrow streets of Surry Hills before disappearing into List Lane, where he barricaded himself into a ramshackle wooden building from where he also worked as a cabinet maker. We will now follow the unfolding scene using the newspaper reports of the day. Certain terms would now be considered politically incorrect, but because it is an historical event, I feel there is no need to censor what was back then acceptable. So I will narrate the reports as written. Please note that the language used in no way reflects my thoughts or opinions. It was about 7:30 p.m. Approaching Goulburn Street, the Chinese stopped and listened. From above him he could hear voices raised in a hymn. They came from a meeting hall in the building, a couple of floors above the shops on the street. In the hall each Sunday night, a religious service was conducted by the Chinese Christian Church. It was controlled by a white woman, Miss Rose Dyson, a zealous and lifelong evangelist and missionary among the yellow races. Festering in the Chinese cabinet maker's mind was some unknown and unexplained canker of madness. He suddenly went berserk and declared a one-man war on society. 17 people were shot as he sprayed lead in a wild 2-gun barrage. Over the next 15 hours he held at bay hordes of police, armed with carbines, mustard gas and fire hoses. Thousands flocked to the scene and packed Chinatown as the crazed Oriental defied the authorities to take him. Traffic was blocked in all directions. In the cottage, Li Hin also was busy. He barricaded the door and nailed timber he used in his trade of cabinet making over the windows. Slits were left for the muzzles of his deadly guns. When he had finished, he was solidly entrenched with plenty of ammunition. It was soon after 8 p.m. when the battle began. Police, under Inspector Doig of Regent Street Station, were posted at every vantage point. They had taken up sniping positions in the other houses, on roofs, in backyards, behind fences and walls. With one accord, they opened fire. Whenever they ceased, a slim arm poked through one of the windows, and Li Hin answered in kind. He seemed to bear a charmed life. Time and again, after a period of quiet, they thought he was dead. Police officers who showed themselves, however, were quickly sent scurrying for cover as Li's slugs whistled through the air. About 50 police were engaged in the actual siege. Carbines were issued, and they kept up a relentless rain of bullets against the cottage. Many of the police wanted to rush the Chinese. They were deterred by strict orders from the Commissioner of Police, James Mitchell, that no unnecessary risks were to be taken by any of his men. As was briefly recorded in our telegrams on Tuesday last, Li Hin, the Chinese who ran amok on Sunday night, was shot dead shortly before 10 a.m. on Monday. Taking refuge in his home, a 2-roomed wooden structure in a lane off Campbell Street, Haymarket, the Celestial successfully held his position all Sunday night, the place being surrounded by police. He kept up a continuous fire on all who approached the premises, and it was evident that he had plenty of ammunition. Much cunning marked his defence as he moved to each of the 3 windows, firing obliquely at his would-be captors. By midnight, Hin slackened his fire, but when the fireman turned the searchlight on his shelter, he recommenced his fusillade, and his shooting was not at all inaccurate. In the early hours of Monday morning, a couple of returned soldiers, one of whom, Dave Sterling, who was playing a part in the Better 'Ole at the Tivoli, tried the effects of some pineapple gas one of them had brought back from France as a souvenir. They put the stuff in a bottle on the end of a long clothes prop, and then, with a string to release the cork, put it through one of the windows of the Chinese fortress. The stuff had some effect, as Hin was heard to be coughing. He only fired 1 shot in 2 hours. When a second attempt was made to put the gas in the place, his pistols began popping again, and the war gas was not used further. After an attempt to fire the place by means of kerosene-soaked bags had been frustrated by Jin, the Metropolitan Fire Brigade tried the effect of hose play on the Chinaman. Tons of water were poured into the place, but failed to stop the shooting. The police kept up a rapid fire on the windows, and several youths had some pea rifle practice as well, but still Chinaman's luck stuck to the besieged one, and he succeeded in wounding 2 of the firemen. He allowed a woman, the wife of a neighbour, to pass the place unhurt, but he fired 5 futile shots at a terrier dog that sprang at him while at a window. Among those who had gathered to see the battle, about 9:30 a.m., was Albert H. Ryan, a native of Indiana and a citizen of Arizona, where gunplay is said to be popular. Ryan had served his time in the U.S. Navy and fought in the Spanish-American War, landing in Sydney last Christmas. He sized up the situation, and after considerable persuasion, he got Inspector Walker to let him have a gun. Police decided to procure some bombs in order to bomb the Chinaman out. But at this stage, Albert H. Ryan, an American, arrived on the scene and remarked, "Has anyone got a regular gun? Give me one, and I'll go after him." Inspector Walker declined the offer, remarking, "He's not worth risking a good life over." But Ryan was persistent, whereupon a service revolver, loaded in all 6 chambers, was handed to him. He immediately hopped in through one of the windows of the house. Ryan was able to see the Chinese lying behind an improvised barricade in a corner of the kitchen. As he caught sight of Ryan, he raised his head above the barricade and fired twice. Immediately his head came into view, Ryan fired with deadly accuracy the whole 6 chambers, and the Chinese fell back dead, with blood spurting from wounds in the face and near the right ear. When carried from the building, many people were under the impression he was still alive and cried out, "Lynch him!" "I'm sorry, old chink," said Ryan, "but I had to do it. You were causing a lot too much excitement around here." The body was then conveyed to the morgue. It is believed the Chinaman fired altogether 300 shots, during which 17 persons were wounded. A Chinese resident of the neighborhood stated that the dead man was a cabinet maker, known as Li Ching and Hua Hook. He explained that the Celestial had been in love with a girl, but that another Celestial had suddenly got into the running. The death of the Chinese cabinet maker Li Hing, who ran amok last week, was inquired into by the city coroner today. Ying Pei stated that the deceased was his brother-in-law. He married his widow. 2 girls lived in China. Sometimes he seemed a little silly in his head. Superintendent John Walker said that he thought Ryan a most courageous gent, even to a man used to a revolver and that class of work. He added that the police were endeavouring to arrest the Chinaman, and Ryan forced himself on them, and did good work in assisting. Albert Ryan, when asked to tell the court what he knew about the affair, said, "Sure, it was like this. When I got up on June the 2nd, I read there was a war on down near the Haymarket. So I went down. I wanted to get as near to the front line trenches as I could. Eventually I got into Lists Lane." The coroner: "Did you see any police there?" Ryan: "Well, I saw two men in blue. One was up at a window with a little pea shooter, a couple of inches long. I asked him why he didn't get a real gun." The coroner: "You are a good gunman?" Ryan: "I'm a fair shot. I've been a deputy sheriff. I was in the American Navy in the Spanish-American War, and in the Revolution in Nicaragua, and in 1913 I was mixed up in the Mexican Revolution." Witness then narrated how he was handed a gun, how he got through the window and saw a head and shoulder, and an arm with a revolver at the end of it, the revolver pointing in his direction. Witness added, "Two shots rang out from the Chinaman. They went for my head somewhat, and my two shots followed. I could see I'd probably hurt the Chinaman somewhat, as his arm dropped. I afterwards found out I'd hit him on the shoulder and in the neck. The quick drop I made to the floor no doubt saved me from meeting a bullet in my stomach somewhere." The coroner: "The Chinaman was dead when he was brought out, wasn't he?" Ryan: "Sure, I made a certainty of that. He was probably dead after the first two shots, but I fired a few more to make sure of him." The coroner: "Your action, anyhow, was plucky." Ryan: "Oh, I've hopped into more dangerous spots than that. I've tackled some problems in the States. Once I chased a man upriver in a small boat for miles, but the beggar committed suicide before I got him." The coroner: "I think you should be highly commended for your bravery and courage." Ryan: "Well, it was like this. I think it is the duty of everyone to help the police and others to keep law and order in their country." The coroner: "Unfortunately, it is not everyone who has the pluck to do it. The fact remains that your act was a brave one. I think it deserves recognition." Ryan: "I would like to say my intentions were to take Chinky alive, and merely to assist the police." The coroner found that the deceased died from the effects of a bullet wound in the head, justifiably inflicted upon him by Albert Ryan in his own defense, while voluntarily assisting the police in the execution of their duty. Hinn, who was armed with an automatic pistol and a long .22 weapon, was found to have enough ammunition at hand to kill several hundreds of people. He was a cabinet maker by trade, and generally regarded as a quiet, inoffensive fellow. The manner in which he carried out his defense was remarkable, and showed very much coolness and cunning, no madness being evident in his methods, except in his insane desire to kill. Those who knew him and his life state that at one time he was a member of the Mission Church, where he opened his attack with a bomb on Sunday night. Owing to his erratic behavior, he was asked to leave. He complained, it appears, that 3 girls belonging to the church had trifled with his feelings and cast him aside for other lovers. This is said to have preyed on a not too strong mind and unhinged him. In other quarters this story is doubted, and church members say he often had strange, wild outbursts. He was a Cantonese and about 40 years of age. A remarkable feature of the affair is that, although 17 persons were wounded, there was not one fatality. Of the 17 injured, only one was a serious case, that of John Hennessy, shot twice in the chest, and he is now progressing satisfactorily. There were many narrow escapes, including that of a returned soldier who had a bullet through his hat. Mr. Ryan came to Sydney in the motor schooner Cameron as an engineer, and he complains that he is marooned here owing to the refusal, for reasons which he does not know, of the American consulate authorities to give a passport to his wife, a girl, he says, whom he married in Sydney, and who is at present sick in hospital. "If I get work to do," added Mr. Ryan, "I will stay here." "Yes," he confided to Miss Ivory Ivories, who dotes on such men. "I guess I've had some luck in my time, sister. There was that American Dago stunt, for instance. I came out without a scratch." "And did you really shoot the Spaniards?" "Not at all, just played with them. And I've been sheriff officer and chased bad men. They fired point blank, but here's your handsome boy still alive. I've also met many women and escaped." "How awfully thrilling! What a run of luck you've had, really." "True, sister, as you was saying, but I've got a cinch that it's all over now. I've killed a Chinaman." Well, my dear friends, I do hope you enjoyed that presentation. An American hero in Sydney in 1919. Very unusual. And what a daring man he was. Incredible. I mean, that took courage, didn't it? To enter a building knowing there is a well-armed gunman there. To just, no body armor in those days. He just went in, while all the rest of the police had been standing out there for like 15 hours. He went in, pop, 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 and the attacker, the gunman, was dead within a few seconds. Amazing. But who was Arizona Ryan? Well, in those days, they couldn't really find out. They didn't have the technology back then to really track down the information of his background, but historians have done so, and they have found out a lot more about Mr. Arizona Ryan, whose real name is Ryan, his surname. His first name was Alexander Ryan. and we are about to find out what his past was really like. He did tell a few tall tales, and that's okay. A good American cowboy should be able to tell a few tall tales. But it turns out that Mr. Lee Hin, was not the first Chinaman that Arizona Ryan had shot. Yes, and his past was not as savoury as perhaps people might have imagined, but he was certainly enjoying the limelight in Sydney, and so he should have. He did an amazing heroic deed, and £50 was a lot of money in those days. But we'll have a look. He got in trouble again in Sydney with the law, but they still turned a blind eye because of his previous heroic deed, but we'll get into that quickly. We'll have a look now at his past. Join me. So here we have the website of news.com Australia, and this is about Arizona Ryan, and it's a summary of it. So it says, but a century later, in the era of digitized newspapers and genealogical databases, it is possible to come up with a much clearer picture of this vigilante. Well, let's call him a special deputy. I mean, the police did give him a gun, so they authorized him to go in, didn't they? So, Ryan was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, on November the 20th, 1876. It doesn't mention his name being Alexander, but I found that out in one of the newspaper clippings. By the mid-1890s, his family had resettled in Los Angeles, and that's when Ryan's experience with the police and revolvers began. But he was on the wrong side of the law. As a troublemaking and trigger-happy teenager, in 1896 he faced court for threatening a Chinese shopkeeper with a revolver. Oh, he threatened him. He didn't shoot him, actually, so a correction there. Apologies. His far-fetched story, it had been the Chinese man's fault, was believed, and Ryan was allowed to go free and keep his gun permit. But he had another revolver-based run-in with the cops just a few weeks later when he was caught doing target practice in his neighborhood. This time he lost his permit. It did seem that he enjoyed guns very much, so what a perfect time to join the Navy, which he did in 1897. And he was truthful about serving in the Spanish-American War. In 1901 he was discharged from the Navy, but was arrested for assault during a violent left-wing protest. Nothing has changed, has it? Nothing much has changed. Again he beat the charges. His next run-in with the law was in 1905 in San Diego, and he was arrested for biting off part of a man's ear during a street fight. Oh my goodness. He went to trial twice and again beat the rap. It's just as well too, because if Ryan had been behind bars on July 21st, 1905, several men may have lost their lives. At 10:30 a.m. that morning in San Diego Harbor, a boiler exploded on the gunboat USS Bennington, blowing men and machinery into the air and ripping open the hull to the sea. 66 men were killed instantly or died soon after of their injuries. Ryan was rowing on the harbour when the disaster happened and heroically rescued some of the survivors by hauling them onto his boat. It can't be denied. He certainly had heroic intentions, and he carried them out to his best ability. In 1909, Ryan was deputy constable in Los Angeles, so he was quite truthful there as well. It was a part-time position he held for a few years. He never worked in Arizona or Texas, and his law enforcement career was hardly stellar. Oh. Ryan's day job was a foreman for a roadwork company, and in December 1909 he pulled a revolver on one of his crew and smashed him in the head with the gun. But it seemed he was quick to blow a fuse, wasn't he? He wasn't very tolerant in those matters. Again, so he had a few arguments, disturbing the peace. And he did get involved in the Nicaraguan Revolution, seemingly as a spy. From February 1911 to May 1913, he spent a lot of time in Mexico, which also tallied with his claim to have been mixed up in the Mexican Revolution. I'm sure he was popping away there, shooting those Mexicans. He was having a ball. Back in the US in 1913, Ryan met and married Sophia Rosenfeld, a wealthy widow who owned a hotel in San Pedro. Mr. and Mrs. Ryan were reported as a happily married couple who remained fond of taking road trips in their expensive Franklin touring car. But in August 1915 they nearly died in his vehicle. Ryan was at the wheel in Portland, Oregon, when he drove down a long hill straight into the path of a freight train roaring towards a level crossing. The circumstances were bizarre. Somehow they got stuck on the tracks, but he was able to throw Sophia and himself clear before the car was smashed to pieces. If it wasn't an accident, if this was an abortive attempt at something more sinister, then Sophia didn't seem to suspect, because she and Ryan were soon again going on the road trips all over California. So they're implying that he might have been trying to kill her, bump her off. If he rescued her, I don't think so. We're going to give him the benefit of the doubt on that one, or at least I am. One night in March 1916, back home and hearing noise on the sidewalk outside of their hotel, Ryan grabbed his trusty revolver and chased down 2 burglars, shooting and wounding one of these unarmed men. He was really going. He was running amok. Mr. Ryan himself was running amok. Hero or not, in October 1916, Ryan's marriage to Sophia was over. He moved out of the hotel and she sought a divorce on the grounds of cruelty. Ryan went off the rails and was soon in court for assaulting 2 men. And then in 1917 he walked into Sophia's hotel and demanded a kiss from his estranged wife. When she refused, he pulled out an automatic pistol. "Goodbye, Sophia," he said. Ryan sat down in a chair and shot himself in the chest. Oh dear. Wasn't life-threatening though, but he got a 180-day sentence in the jail house. After 20 years of run-ins with the police, Ryan was finally going to do some prison time. So after that he went north to San Francisco and worked on the boats. And in late 1918 he was heading over to Oz, arriving in Sydney on Christmas 1918. And there he met and married an Irish lass named Ethel. So we don't have any photos of Ethel, unfortunately. Yeah, so this was the part that I also found in the newspapers. After shooting Lee Hin, the newly famous cowboy was given a job as a watchman at the Sydney wharves, which were in a state of unrest due to an ongoing maritime strike. On July the 7th, around lunchtime, Ryan got into an argument with 2 sailors who were trying to go ashore from their ship. True to form, Ryan pulled out his revolver and shot one of the men. A constable arrived on the scene and asked him what had happened. "I shot that bastard there," Ryan said. "If he comes near me again, I'll shoot him again." Miraculously, the seaman survived unhurt because the bullet had lodged in a paybook in his shirt pocket, but Ryan was charged. He was remanded to stand trial for shooting with intent to do bodily harm. He was allowed out on £60 bail, which he paid with the £10 in his pocket and a £50 reward he had just received for killing Lee Hin, so it couldn't have been that long after, was it? But when Ryan stood trial, the maritime strike had finished and all the witnesses were away at sea. The judge had no alternative but to release him, and I'm sure they were happy to do so. Before he left, he had one last thing to say to the press. "You'll hear more about me. Don't worry." But Australians didn't. Despite all the trouble he had seen, stopped and caused, Ryan went on to live a quiet life back home in California, fathering 13 children with Ethel, before passing away in March 1947. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating? Regarding Mr. Lee Hin, I will say a few good words about him. Others aren't. So I found out when I was scrolling through the Microfiche, the newspaper archives, that the wife of the neighbour had met him at 5 o'clock the evening before, and as usual had exchanged a polite word with this inoffensive and placid cabinet maker. She next met him running from his shanty with automatics in his hands and carrying a heavy bag, presumably containing ammunition. Though he was shooting at the pursuing crowd, he did not attempt to shoot her. During the evening this lady became anxious about the return of her husband. She knew that he would come home along the lane. There was no other means of warning him, so she walked calmly down the lane, passing right in front of the stronghold of the Chinese, and he never fired at her. So that tells me that he had a grudge, certain people, and the people who were kind to him, as this lady was, he had no quarrel with. He did not intend to hurt them at all. Of course, the people who were shooting at him, he was going to shoot back to the end. I guess it was suicide by police. And he obviously had this grudge with the people in his church group. He obviously had some mental problems, without a doubt, but he still had the lucidity not to hurt her. That is something. That's something commendable, I will say. There we have a side profile of Alexander M. Ryan. Bullets blazed when crazed Chinese ran amok in Sydney. I hope you enjoyed that presentation. I'm sure many of you have not heard this story before. It'll be the first time, and I hope you found it very enjoyable. This was an article written in 1954. They were remembering the event. Yes, I guess Sydney back then was a bit like the Wild West. People were allowed guns, and people were shooting each other and slashing each other up. It was quite lawless. So Mr. Ryan, he fitted in quite well there, didn't he? Yeah, amazing character. Amazing character. And it's interesting how he said his intention was to bring out the Chinese man alive, but he obviously had no intention of doing that. He actually said to another reporter, I found out in one of the newspaper clippings, that he made sure that he killed him, so there wouldn't be any lengthy trial afterward. Saved them the expense, he said. Well, my dears, that's about it. I do hope you've enjoyed this presentation and look forward to seeing you again on the next one. Goodbye, take care, and God bless.
Well, don't just sit there. Pick it up. It's for you. That's right, you. Pick it up.